Tonight's lecture is presented by the Artisans Alliance of Jawaja. They are here. And it's very early in the morning, 12 and a half hours difference. The leatherworkers and weavers are a relatively small group, and I had hoped to open this presentation by telling you a little bit about them and the daily challenges they face. These challenges are fundamental. 30 years ago, members of the group could only afford a meal every second day, and they were not permitted to drink from the village well. If someone wanted to buy a bidi, which is one of those Indian cigarettes, he had to pay for it, but the transaction was something that I don't think any of you could quite conceive. The shop owner would light the bidi after they'd paid for it, take a puff and flick the butt on the ground behind the store. The buyer would then pick it up and smoke the rest. I thought I would be talking about how much progress has been made on these challenges, how the group can now afford 2 meals a day, how they can purchase bidis from the counter as they chat about business with the stall owner, and how, for the most part, they are still waiting to be permitted to most village wells. Instead, I'm here to tell you about something that has stopped them in their tracks on the eve of one of the most important opportunities to come before them. The Canadian High Commissioner has denied Ashoke Chatterjee a visa to enter Canada. Ashoke was to translate and facilitate the visit of the Jawaja representatives. For those of you who may not know Ashoke, let me tell you a little bit about him. He was head of India's National Institute for Design for 25 years. He has been involved with institutional development at Chistry School of Design, Bangalore, Indus Valley School of Design and Architecture, Karachi, Royal College of Art, UK. He has been the director of Crafts Council of India and is currently honorary advisor. He is on the board of Aid to Artisans USA. He has done consulting and training for UNICEF, for the World Conservation Union based in Geneva, for the World Bank and the Ford Foundation, among others. He was a chair of the UNESCO International Conference on Natural Dyes in 2006. He holds a current US visa and a current UK visa. He has been denied a visa to enter Canada, and the rejection reads, "I am not satisfied that you have a legitimate business purpose in Canada, and therefore I do not consider you to be a genuine temporary resident who would leave Canada." The decision is final and not open to appeal. The denial is outrageous. It only becomes more outrageous when we learn that the present Canadian government is trying very hard to woo India in an effort to increase trade. Prime Minister Harper is scheduled to visit in early November. Since this news broke, we have experienced strong support from individuals. Letters have been written to Immigration Minister Jason Kenney expressing indignation. And much to our surprise, people have purchased tickets to tonight's lecture who don't live here and cannot attend, simply to show their support. Maiwa has been in business with Jawaja since 1993, over 15 years. Their visas were denied as well on the third application. It's not easy to apply for a visa. We go through tremendous amounts. I think I showed the last group, but this is the binder that went with Jawaja's application. It has all our bank records, invoices back and forth, financial statements. It has letters of support from the entire community, whether it be the museum, my bank manager, which is State Bank of India, the Governor General of Canada, Michelle Jean, the Minister of Culture, the Mayor of Vancouver, all go as part of their thing. Equally, Jawaja had to prove that they had land holdings, that they had a wife and family, and all their papers had to be photocopied and presented. They went back and forth to Delhi to go for interviews, and for absolutely every question, everything was answered and in place. The last thing we were waiting for was Ashoke's visa. With the flick of a ballpoint pen, the greatest opportunity to improve the lives of a group of incredibly skilled artisans vanishes. It was an opportunity that did not involve charity or foreign aid. All it required was a visit to Canada and the chance to communicate with an audience who was already waiting, anxious to hear their story. You will hear that story tonight. It's a little bit different. Incredible strides have been made by the Jawaja group, and the story of their success is studied worldwide as a model for artisan empowerment. When I address you from the stage, I often speak about the need to make a lasting commitment to a group of artisans. Once a relationship is established, one cannot walk away from the group. This is a responsibility and an obligation. It is also a great privilege. I have had the chance to see this group develop and change in a way nobody else does. 15 years ago, I might have had doubts. Trade and business, especially across continents, is tricky. It involves languages and culture changes. It's challenging. But today, all the doubts are gone in the case of Jawaja, and in their place is a pride to be in partnership with a group of artisans who are just now taking their place on the world stage. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome the representatives from the Artisan Alliance, Jawaja.
Namaskar, good morning. My name is Sukhdev. I'm the president of the Artisan Association of Jawaja, and on the occasion of Diwali, I welcome you all. My name is Ramlal. I work in the Jawaja Leather Group of the Artisan Alliance of Jawaja, and I'm president of Leatherworkers. Good morning. Namaskar. My name is Gopi Lal. I work in the Jawaja Leather Group, and I'm a weaver. My name is Omkar Lal. I'm a member of the Artisan Alliance of Jawaja, and I live in Bihabakas. I'm a weaver as well. My name is Paras Lal. I'm a member of the Artisan Alliance of Jawaja, and I live in Bihabakas. My name is Lal. I work in the Artisan Alliance of Jawaja, and I live in Bihabakas.
सभी को सुबह की नमस्कार। मेरा नाम
बाबूलाल।
आर्टिजन अलायंस
जवाजा
सदगांव का निवासी हूँ और लेदर का काम करता हूँ।
Good morning and thank you all for coming and for giving us this opportunity to be with you once again. It's a great privilege to be part of this fraternity of those who believe in crafts and work for artisans the world over. Last week, those of you who attended the session that I was privileged to participate in will have remembered that we tried to position the present position of crafts in our country. We did a quick run through the centuries of tradition that lie behind craft activity in India today and the central role of hand production and crafts in India's struggle for freedom against colonial rule. In this, there were two dominant personalities who influenced what India thought and did about crafts, Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore. And much of what you will hear today is in fact their legacy, but a legacy which is in crisis, and we'll explore the reasons why. When India became independent in 1947, it was the first developing country to position crafts within national planning, and there have been considerable achievements. Achievements in production, in export, in recognition, in awareness. Crafts is the second largest employer after agriculture in India. And remember, we're a nation of 1 billion people, most of whom live in villages and are engaged in agriculture. That gives you some idea of the scale of this activity, which the Artisans Alliance of Jawaja represent, and the significance of what they're doing in the international context. However, that scale is also an indication of the crisis, because although crafts is the largest employer after agriculture, nobody knows quite how many of India's over 1 million citizens are involved. Estimates range from 6 million to 200 million, and 200 million is probably an underestimate. The crisis today is occasioned by several things. Perhaps the most important crisis is the crisis of inadequate marketing skills within a market which is stringently competitive and changing at such a rapid pace, both in India and overseas. with this enormous change that is taking place in the world economy, an attitude is developing in India that crafts represents an old-fashioned, irrelevant activity, not in keeping with India's thrust towards modernity. Perhaps this is the nub of the crisis. How does one answer this? These millions of artisans are dispersed all over the country. They lack political clout. There's no space where they can bang on the table to be heard. Activists are trying, but we have been inadequate to the crisis so far. That's something that we hope to explore with you. In a sense, the artisans of Jawaja reflect both the opportunity which Indian crafts have today, which is unparalleled, as well as the crisis. In a sense, also, they represent the legacy of Gandhiji. Gandhi believed that true freedom depended on self-reliance, and that self-reliance was dependent on systems of production and sustainable livelihoods that were decentralized and that were rooted in India's village environment. So, in a sense, the story of the Artisan Alliance of Jawaja is a reflection both of what we have achieved in India and what we have failed to achieve, both of the opportunity as well as of the crisis. So, over to the Artisans Alliance of Jawaja.
When the Artisan Alliance of Jawaja knew that they were coming, this is a year and a half ago, they started to prepare, and they've prepared a slideshow. It is very powerful. And they also prepared a workshop that they were never able to give. And this workshop was going to be fantastic. They put so much thought into what they were going to come to. It was the first time they had told their story themselves to an international audience. And they were very excited, even up to today when we asked them about technical problems, if they had any other concerns. It was like, yeah, we're concerned about our visas. Isn't that what everybody's concerned about? So this is in cooperation with the students from NID, the National Institute for Design. They've put together this PowerPoint. This is one partial telling of a far larger set of stories. Stories that have been lived by and at various times scripted and enacted by the artisans of Jawaja, some of whom are present here today. The National Institute of Design kindly facilitated access to their archives. Siddhartha Chatterjee and Anita Balachandran of Sea Change helped put together this curtain raiser. Thanks are due to Ashoke Chatterjee, Neelam Iyer, Charlotte Kwan, Helena Pirhentupa, and Jawaja's artisans and people for the images and work you see here. The Maiwa Textile Symposium, and Charlotte Kwan in particular, have our gratitude for organizing and supporting this effort. In 1975, the Jawaja block, located in a drought-prone district of the northwestern state of Rajasthan, India, included about 200 villages and were home to about 80,000 people. So there's Rajasthan. And next is the district of Ajmer. And next is Biarwar, which is the closest town. The road to Jawaja block, a cluster of villages including Biarwar Khas, Delvada, Kabra, Kotra, Malpura, Jawaja, Sargon, and Sarmalia. A tank en route, replenished by low seasonal rain. A typical village street. At a well. The government designated Jawaja a region of high poverty and no resources. No resources? That year, the National Institute of Design, NID, Ahmedabad, was invited to be involved with the Rural University, a new experiment in education and rural development initiated by Ravi J. Matai, a former director of IIMA, the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. Some key questions before them were: could academic institutes actively collaborate with rural communities to catalyze local solutions to problems of poverty and hunger? Could local self-reliance emerge from a process of mutual learning between such communities and other groups of people? The Rural University began as an action experiment in learning by doing. It set out as a mutual inquiry into self-reliance with a deep respect for Jawaja's foremost resource, its people. Can people do something for themselves tomorrow that others are doing for them today, so that they should be released of that dependence? Ravi Matai asked the Rural University. The NID teams, which joined volunteers from IIMA, were led by teachers and students, among whom were textile designer Helena Pirhanthupa and product design student Neelam Iyer. The teams moved to Jawaja to introduce themselves to some of the poorest, low-caste occupational groups. Over months, they would be accepted and work closely with the Raigar families of leatherworkers and the relatively better-off bunker families of weavers. There were extended public consultations at first. The interest of local elites and the initial mistrust of more underprivileged groups towards these newcomers became evident. The potentials of ceramics, tobacco leaf, stone, camel hair, and dairy products were considered, and a few experiments were initiated. Tomatoes, for one, were to be of limited success. Although there were few craft traditions known from this area, several people were knowledgeable of spinning and weaving, and there were a few looms. These looms were used to make woolen shawls, otnis, and other locally worn textiles woven by the village bunkar or weaver to use, barter, or sell. There were the many objects made from leather, cattle adornments and harnesses, and the widely worn jutta, mujari, or footwear, often colorfully embroidered. These were made by the Raigar community, customarily responsible for skinning and disposing of animal corpses, curing the hides, and the making and fixing of leather products. Already among the lowest status occupations, resentment against the Raigars was arguably aggravated by their own community leaders' resolutions between the mid-40s and 60s to ban flaying, tanning, and shoe repair in order to raise their social status. There were also the leather bags, or chara, used to draw water from wells, made increasingly obsolete by electric pumps and plastics, which also came to be used to make cheap shoes. By the 70s, those Raigars who still worked with leather couldn't flay animals, and so were purchasing what was formerly a free material at market rates inflated by raw leather exports, raising their costs and adding to their competitive disadvantage. Fierce punishments were inflicted on those breaking the ban. All this was to make a few shoes and harnesses for a shrinking local market. Local markets and resources are operated by those of higher castes. Despite the entry of modern banking systems and growing awareness of alternative financing, the flexibility and speed of traditional money lending systems support this difficult sector. While leatherworking and weaving represented clear and present challenges to self-reliant livelihoods, they also emerged as the opportunity and basis for sustained group effort, and for this story of Jawaja. Designs and techniques were refined in dialogue between the artisans and designers to create a quality range of contemporary, saleable products. Products such as bags, belts, wallets, folders, rugs, diary covers, and more. One aim was to reach out to external markets, totally unfamiliar to local power structures, in order to create a measure of self-reliance for the artisans. The design and management volunteers worked alongside the artisans to link existing skills with new products, better materials, and responsive markets. Working towards self-reliance meant nurturing and building on available skills, rather than retraining in new occupations or using capital-intensive machinery. Improved material techniques, faster and more predictable tanning, for instance, followed in consultation with organizations like the Central Leather Research Institute. The weavers and leather crafts groups each had their stories to tell of all this, and the products speak for themselves. With their striking simplicity and rich earth tones, Jawaja products evoke the landscape and ecology of these villages. In them are traces of sand and earth, trees and animals, of patterns and rhythms of the everyday, the very texture of life in the desert. An example of a rug design that a craftsman explained as having evolved in a place of flies and damp earth. The colors, motifs, and design idiom come together when the artisans ask what was special about their environment that could help establish a clear identity for their products. This idiom then influenced design education at NID, partnered by Helena Piranthupa and others there. The artisans began to understand modern marketing and design, emerging as artisan designers in their own right. Jawaja leather products were and are all entirely handmade from leather that is also painstakingly treated and cured manually. The rugs are also entirely hand-woven on looms using hand-spun wool. Working as a collective, the Artisans Alliance of Jawaja continue to learn together to deal with the challenges of self-reliant entrepreneurship. These challenges include group problem solving, building trust and accountability between members dealing with the promise and complexity of mutuality in a cooperative, what happens to debts when individual members default or leave, avoiding the age-old debt traps by locating new markets outside the control of local power structures, building the capacity to negotiate with distant clients, and locating alternative sources of financing. Each issue a huge challenge in itself. Quality control, stock taking, and planning inventory. Developing new strategies of self-help. So how successful has the Jawaja experiment been? A lot has changed since 1975.
पहले तो अलग अलग
हाँ सुना था
सुना था नहीं हकीकत
हाँ
बहुत ही पाबंदी
हाँ
अब ऐसी बात नहीं
अब ऐसी बात नहीं है। ये जो काम है ये सारा इससे ही ये बदलाव आया है या
दृष्टि सुधरेगी जब सारा इसमें बदलाव आ जाएगा जब तक आर्थिक स्थिति कमजोर होगी तो उसमें कोई सहयोग नहीं देगा
Once barred from using certain village wells, members of lower caste groups have acquired access to this water, scarce as it is. People who could not afford to eat once a day now eat twice, and own houses. Jawaja's distinctive products exhibit and sell today in national and global markets. Processes of management, innovation, and marketing are all run by the artisans.
वो एग्जाम में किया था NID में किया था वो काफी टाइम से चल रहा है
बहुत ही ज्यादा चलता है आज भी
बहुत चीजें अभी तक बदला नहीं है वो बदलने वाला भी
बहुत डिमांड है उसकी आज भी बहुत सारा
विदेश में भी डिमांड है तो इंडिया में
ये जो आप डिजाइन जो आप बनाते हैं वो पहले के ही है या उसको भी आप
नहीं डिजाइनों में बदलाव है डिजाइनों में बदलाव ऐसा है कि पहले तो हम प्लेन दरी बनाते थे उसके बाद में NID से हमें और डिजाइन मिला था तो उससे हमने ये डिजाइन की और कलर कॉम्बिनेशन बदले उसमें भी ऑर्डर मिलते रहे टूर्नामेंट के समय में हमको प्लेन दरी का ऑर्डर मतलब प्लेन दरी सिखाई गई थी बिल्कुल उसमें डिजाइन वगैरह नहीं था उसके बाद में जैसे जैसे डिजाइन का तो तरीका बदलता गया वैसे वैसे ब्रांड बदलते गए तो आज भी अब ये डिजाइन तो ये है और पार्टी कहती है कि इसमें कलर कॉम्बिनेशन चेंज करना है तो उनके जो कलर कॉम्बिनेशन होते हैं उनको लगाया जाता है
An uncommon example of self-reliance through mutual learning, Jawaja has inspired individuals and organizations across the world. Development is about people, not about statistics, says Ravi Matai of the Rural University. We were 3 young women just out of university, eager to make a difference to rural folk. We had visited Bal in Saurashtra, a vast wasteland affected by poverty, patriarchy, and oppression of every kind. We knew about Jawaja and went to talk to Ravi Matai. He was the only one who encouraged us to see the difficulties in Bal as resources for change, to understand the people first, and to try and understand the situation from their perspective, not ours. And then to go ahead as partners with care and respect. After all these years, we look back. Jawaja was the seed from which we grew, says Nafisa Bharat, Uttan, India. Leading NGOs known around the world influenced by the Jawaja experiment include Pradhan, India, whose founder Deep Joshi received the 2009 Magsaysay Award. Basics, Hyderabad, headed by Vijay Mahajan, an international expert in microfinance. Uttan, led by Nafisa Bharat, acknowledged for key contributions to drinking water, sanitation, and human rights. The Tatadan Academy, Madurai, founded by Jawaja colleague Professor Ranjit Gupta. Dan, started by alumni of Pradhan. The Madras Institute of Development Studies and the Crafts Council of India, with its affiliate state councils across India and links with the World Crafts Council. Almost every notable experiment in craft development in India over the past years has been influenced by the Jawaja experiment, including IIMA, the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, and the design institutes that have followed it, and the Rights and Resource Group, Washington, D.C., where early Jawaja volunteer Arvind Khare now works. Wherever Jawaja volunteers have gone, they acknowledge their debt to learning from and alongside the artisans. The Jawaja experience has been about development understood as learning from one another in an environment of mutual respect and equality, about individuals, groups, institutions, and perhaps most of all, the forces of tradition and modernity meeting on a somewhat level playing field. Crafts is a wonderful space to express this, as happened in Jawaja, but the influence extends well beyond crafts to so many efforts concerned with dignity, self-reliance, self-empowerment, and livelihoods. Efforts that can and must be sustained in a world changing at a pace that leaves so many of us so few resources, even further at the margins of progress. The Jawaja experiment was about affording more choices to those who would seldom choose, through building the capabilities and confidence to not only choose well, but also to realize some of the choices made.
एक तो हमारे एजुकेशन का अभाव होने की वजह से हम कस्टमर को बराबर अपना समझाने में वो जब दिमाग में जमेगी तभी तो वो खरीदेगा।
सही।
तो उसको डिटेल से नहीं समझा सकते हैं।
बिचौलिया तो फिर क्या, फिर वो बिचौलिया रहते हैं, दुकानदार को क्या बचता है, मतलब क्या बचता है, तो वो तो बोल देता है।
Today, Jawaja's greatest challenges lie perhaps still in marketing their work in an increasingly competitive English-speaking world.
एक खरीदार 500 किलोमीटर 1000 किलोमीटर पर दूर बैठा हुआ है, हम गांव के किसी जंगल के जैसे वहां जहाँ आने जाने का साधन भी जहाँ संपन्न है, हम वहां बैठे हुए हैं, तो इसका उनका तालमेल बराबर कैसे हुआ? एक तरह की परेशानी है, पता भी तो नहीं होता ना भाई कितने तो भी कौन कितनी चीजें बेच रहा है वो हमें पता नहीं है। वो तो फिर वो जिस दिल्ली वाले लोग उनको ही पता है, वो ही हमारे पास लेके आते हैं।
आपने ये जो वेबसाइट अपना लगाया है, आपका वेबसाइट है ना? उसके थ्रू कुछ हुआ है?
जबकि 2 साल हो गया, आपने 3 साल हो गया, तभी उससे कोई ऑर्डर नहीं है,
डायरेक्ट ऑर्डर नहीं है आपके पास?
This is a scenario in which industrial goods and opaque chains of sellers and middlemen routinely have the effect of marginalizing small-scale crafts producers. There is hope and optimism at home. Like millions of other artisans in India and the world over, speaking only their native languages and relying on their hand skills, creativity, and collective strength, the many craftspeople of Jawaja face their challenging futures today. These are the artisans. Earlier today, when we were practicing this very early this morning, they were very excited about the questions they might get.
Very sorry you couldn't come to Canada. Hope to see you another time. I'd love to buy one of your bags. Will you have a label in your bag?
They would love to put their labels in these bags, but 60% of what they sell is done through exporters, and they tend to want to put their own labels in the bags.
This was interesting because Tim over here designed this label, which we designed with the Jawaja artisans. It clearly tells you who they are and what their craft does and so forth. So we took them to them to put in their bags, but no exporter wants the label in the bag because they don't want to identify who the artisans are. A typical problem with working with exporters and craft. They want their own label to be in the bag.
Could I just come in here and just make a point? There's another answer to that, which I think is that in time, once they are able to develop their marketing skills, if they create a strong brand identity for Jawaja, then that becomes an advantage for the trader, not a disadvantage. And therefore, perhaps they would be more open to allowing the Jawaja name to be on the actual product when it moves from the artisan to the trader. I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that perhaps that's something that could be explored.
Are women involved in the cooperative as well?
Yes, absolutely. Women do 50% of the work, whether that's to do with leather, embroidery, weaving work. They're very involved at several stages, most stages of production.
This is an issue that affects the entire craft sector in India. And whereas women do about 50% of the work, very often their contribution is not included in the costing and pricing system. And that has to change.
We wish you were here. How long does it take to make a bag? How many can you make in, say, a week?
That really depends on the design of the bag. If you were to generalize and take an average, it would be a bag a day, and that's with one couple working on it. So a man and woman will take about a day to make a bag, which means 7 bags a week.
Would you be kind enough to just take one of the bags that's in front of you and talk to us a little bit about the stages of making the bag?
First, the leather hide that he was demonstrating, then the pattern. Depending on the pattern, the next stage is cutting the leather. After cutting, the next stage is glazing, which is done with a discarded glass bottle. Then the shaping of the product. He held up a pencil holder, and now in his hand, there is the shaping of a bag, small handbag or wallet that he is creating at the moment.
What kind of leather What kind of animals?
It's buffalo hide. Keep in mind that one of the challenges for this group was the observation that you already heard. They used to get raw material free because they themselves would do the flaying of the animals. Then their caste elders decided that because this was a stinking profession and a stinking process, they would ban the flaying of animals in order to lift their social status, depriving them immediately of free raw material. In the presentation that you saw, you might remember that in the early designs, you saw some braided items. There's an interesting background to that. What happened after they were banned from flaying animals was that the carcass would be dragged to a location where a still lower caste would do the flaying of animals. In the process, the hides would get scratched and torn, and the quality of leather when this experiment started in 1975 was very poor. The artisans and designers then decided that they would try to see if there were products that could be made where the roughness of the material could be used to advantage. And one of the first products was made by stripping the leather and braiding them into belts. So you had a situation at the National Institute of Design and the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, where irrespective of what garments you wore, everyone was wearing braided belts, because that was the first product and we really had to find a market for it. First bag, interestingly enough, developed through a contact which the late Ravi Mathai had with a school in the high Himalayas. The headmaster of that school said that the parents were always complaining about having to purchase several school bags every year because kids would drag their bags up and down the hillside. Well, said the artisans, we can give you an indestructible bag. And that was created, was a school bag for the boys and girls at Sanara School near Simla in the Himalayas. And the bag story started there.
Ashok, Jawaja group, how long does the tanning process take?
15 to 20 days, the curing and tanning.
What are the dyes used?
There is a plant native to Rajasthan called the babul. You strip the plant, use the skin for making the natural dye. This is one of the key issues in that environment, which is so degraded that many of the traditional trees and plants that would be used for making natural dyes have disappeared from Rajasthan. And the area has been denuded in what was once thickly forested.
Now that they have a better market for themselves, have they started getting their own leather again, or do they still buy it from outside?
Now they are dealing with the markets of leather in Gujarat and in Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh. They no longer depend on leather from the local area as they did in the beginning. It could be pointed out here that at the early stages of design work, one of the rules, if you like, of the experiment was to use only local material. The reason for that was that every time they stepped out of the village, they were exploited. But as their ability to negotiate with markets improved, ability to negotiate with suppliers improved, they've been able to go out into the market and get the kind of materials that they think their customers require.
When is the dye applied? Is it in the hide or after the bag is made?
After the curing and tanning is completed, that is when color is applied. The polishing is the final stage after production of the bag.
What do you use as a polish? What makes the bag shiny?
The main thing is polishing, hand polishing with a bottle. Yeah. They only use glass polish, manually polished with glass. They don't use any other kind of polish.
I would like to know if the younger generation or the present generation, are they happy to come back to the craft and learn the craft and take it up?
The response from Babalal is yes, the younger generation is involved. They have their sons and nephews and working with them, and that attracting the next generation depends on the condition of the market. Let me add here that when the experiment started in 1975, the younger generation told us the last thing they ever wanted to do was to be associated with the craft. They said the craft was the source of the indignity and the suffering that they had. And what they wanted to do was disappear from this village, disappear from this craft, and meld into the urban environment where nobody could recognize them as being untouchable castes who did leather work. That has changed, and I think that's one of the greatest achievements of this project, because through the craft, as you saw in the presentation, this community has now got a measure of dignity and of self-worth. That dignity and self-worth has come through the craft. So the craft has again acquired a status which for years it did not have. As he mentioned, everything depends on the market as well as on the group interaction. Just now, a very particular crisis in Jawaja applies to the weavers. The weavers group is in debt to the extent of about 8 lakhs of rupees, which I think, if my calculation is right, is about 16,000 US dollars. And the entire experiment today, as we speak, this 30 years, is now endangered because they are back in the grips of a moneylender. Now, what is happening is that this is having a chicken and egg effect. This debt was occasioned by poor financial management. It was one cause, and poor group discipline. This is a problem in artisan groups throughout our country. But even more important was that 6 lakhs out of these 8 lakhs in which they are indebted is represented by rent, which this group of artisans has had to pay to the government of Rajasthan for a small plot of land on which they have a common facility center. This is the crisis of crafts. If you are a multinational or a big corporation moving into Rajasthan, you get free land, you get free loans or low interest loans. Everything is done to give you a business incentive. And here is a small group of artisans who have, through their traditional skills, lifted themselves out of a measure of poverty into something approaching a quality of life. They've done it through self-reliance, never received any handouts, never accepted any handouts, and they have paid to the government of their state in rent more than the value of the little piece of land that has been leased to them. This is the kind of scandal that is accepted as okay in this country. And this is the status of artisans today. Despite 60 years of effort, despite Mahatma Gandhi, we're in this kind of situation where the Jawaja experiment today is endangered. The artisans over the last 6 months have been running to pillar and from pillar to post. We've gone to almost every organization that knows about development. And to this day, we have not been able to locate a source of a low interest or no interest loan which can get the moneylender off their back and enable them to get their act together, to get their marketing and financial skills in shape, and to take advantage of the opportunities in front of them. So the question about the next generation is a profound one, because the weavers now find that no one will now join their group until the debt situation is sorted out. Nobody wants to join a group which is in debt. So we have to get the debt resolved before the younger generation will move in. They're ready to move in, but they're waiting. The result of this is that when significant orders come in, the Artists Alliance is not able to accept large orders for floor coverings of the kind that you see displayed here, because there are not enough weavers in the group. There are not enough weavers in the group because the group is in debt. And the debt, we still have not been able to find a way to resolve that crisis. This is the kind of issue that almost every artisan group is facing throughout the country. And after 60 years and any number of government schemes on paper, we're not able to provide artisans with quick access to the kind of counseling and support that they need.
Many of the people here tonight in the audience have been donating to a fund to raise the money to pay off this debt. And although the debt is from the weavers, it also affects the leather workers because it is an alliance, it's a cooperative, and both are affected. Is that not correct?
That is correct. What is coming up now is that there are several fine institutions that have offered to work with the Artisans Alliance of Jawaja to improve their business practices and to enable them to become effective entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship with strong marketing skills is at the heart of sustainability. And the situation that has arisen is something that must never allow to be happen again. What they plan to do, there are two things, and we're working on that right now. One is to ensure that there are uniform practices within the association, that the leather workers and the weavers adopt exactly the same business practices, so that clients dealing with the Artisans of Alliance of Jawaja don't have to guess whether the weavers are working one way and the leather workers are working another. So that's one big step, is to, as I say, raise this amount of money. And then what? The idea is that they would pay back. And what we're also exploring is they would pay back into a development fund. And that development fund could be and should be used to share their skills with other artisans. This is something they've been doing for many, many years. This was the terms on which NID and IIM worked with these artisans in the beginning. Nothing was given free. No services from institutions was given free, but payment was taken in kind. The weavers and the leather workers undertook that if they received services from NID and IIM, they in turn would help others. And that's the culture that we want to sustain through this effort. That no handouts, you take a loan, you pay back that loan goes into a development fund, which then the Artisans Alliance of Jawaja uses to help other artisans, to share their skills, not just their craft skills, but to share their management experience, their successes as well as their failures, and to help other artisans to ensure that they don't have to face the same kind of difficulties that Arjas had to face over 30 years.
What are your hopes for the future?
भविष्य की आपका क्या आशा है? आप क्या चाहते हैं भविष्य के लिए? The most important hope they have is of orders coming in for both bags and for textiles. Their hope for the next generation and for their families is that they would leave behind a situation that was healthy, and that the next generation would feel a pride and a security in continuing the traditions of their forefathers.
I would like to know if the artisans here have any questions for our audience tonight.
Babulal asked the question, what do folk in Canada think of their leather products?
You know, anywhere we go in the city, when I'm traveling, when I'm on my way to India and I'm in an airport, that's like a badge of honor. People will come across and go, "Oh my God, you have a Jawaja bag. Where did you get it?" And it's just so wonderful. But they really, really stand out anywhere they are. They have such strong design, and they're always so beautifully made that people wear them and wear them and wear them. They age so beautifully. So we all wear our Jawaja bags very proudly.
There's an interesting little story. Soon after Ravi Mathai passed away, very sadly, 20 years ago, his widow was standing on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., outside the White House. And a car went by, and the license plate said, Jawaja. We're still trying to figure out who that was.
I was really glad to hear about the school bag story because I've been taking such very good, careful care of my bag, wanting it to last a huge long time. So now I know I can drag it around and it doesn't, it's not going to deteriorate. It's fabulous quality, and thank you for that.
That's very true. And in fact, the bags age beautifully. The more bashing they get, the more beautiful they get. At least that's my experience.
I have a question as to what are the present marketing tools that they're doing at the moment, apart from their website, which seems to be not working.
The answers is that the leather group has a number of export clients that they serve, and also a number of stores in various parts of India which take their products. The weavers say that they have had this constraint of not being able to service large orders because of this debt problem and the small numbers that they have at this moment. They hope to get over that. There's also been the effect of the market slowdown on both the groups. Fortunately, in India, that slowdown has not been as severe, perhaps, as in Europe and perhaps in North America, but it still has been a factor. However, they are pretty confident about servicing orders once the orders come in. So hopefully, this is a temporary phase. At present, they point out that they do have some loyal stores. The other channel, which they didn't mention but is important, is the opportunities that NGOs open up to them through exhibitions and sales, such as those organized by the Crafts Council of India, Dastakar, the Delhi Haat in Delhi, which is a place where artisans come throughout the years to sell their products. Those are other opportunities in addition to what they just mentioned.
Does India allow you to borrow money from outside of the country, or do you have to borrow money just within your own government?
The regulations do not allow direct borrowing from overseas unless you have, or even receiving money from overseas, unless you have what is called a FCRA, which is a registration process. So at present, they are restricted to borrowing from local sources. However, there are many ways in which external loans can be accessed through those who have got the permission. Many in NGOs and others in civil society are registered, and they can receive the money on behalf of the artisans. So that's not really a major problem at this stage. But what we have been trying to do is to explore local sources of low interest or no interest loan for this particular problem that exists today.
Are there any special physical health problems that are related to any part of the process?
No, there are no processes which endanger their health. Let me add, however, that in this part of Rajasthan, and indeed in so many parts of India, the standard of public health is appalling. Tuberculosis, malaria are rampant, and child mortality is at perfectly unacceptable rates. Drinking water is contaminated. The pollution of traditional water sources is huge throughout Rajasthan. And this year there's been an enormous drought. So whereas their craft operations may be safe, they live in an environment which is truly hazardous to health.
Is there a particular reason apart from the debt why the weavers' products are not popular, or why aren't they making enough money for themselves?
The response is that the biggest issue is the loan. However, there is a continuous need for fresh collections, and they do need design support. They have with designers, and most recently, the Institute of Craft and Design in Jaipur has offered to work on new collections for them. Also, a new chain called Mother Earth, which has started in Bangalore and Madras, they too have offered to give them design support, both the leather workers and the weavers. The interesting experience over the years has been that whereas the largest sales are probably the classic products which have come through 3 decades, in order to keep those products going, you constantly have to have new collections. So that's something that will always be a challenge. They'll have to keep up with the market and produce new collections which can attract new customers as well as renew the demand for their classic range.
How big is your demand for electricity and how is electric power obtained?
Jawaja mein bijli ka, for the last 25 years, they have been able to get electric supply in their villages. The supply tends to be erratic, but they do have it, and it's not a major issue for them anymore. I can vouch for that because when we first went to Jawaja, by nightfall, everything was absolutely pitch black. For those of us who came from cities, we didn't realize what nightfall really was until we went to Jawaja. But today, they do have dwellings. They've moved out of hovels into dwellings, and there are lamps burning, and there are also occasional street lights as well.
I have a question for the weavers. Is when they get the new designs which are not their traditional ones, do they relate to them or can they identify themselves with the designs?
There's several responses here amongst themselves. The answer basically is that they have had no huge problem in dealing with clients who bring designs to them. In fact, they welcome it. However, they have had occasions when they've had to negotiate with the client to say that what the client is asking may not be really very feasible. So there's a back and forth. They also are saying that getting inputs from the market is absolutely essential. They feel that even for their own progress, they need to understand what kinds of designs the market wants. So they welcome it when people come to them with designs and negotiations start. The important thing is it's a negotiation. They feel confident enough to be able to negotiate.
What is it that the artisans will take back to the village about the presentation that they've been a part of? How will they take it back to their village?
The response is that they're going to go back greatly encouraged and share with their families and their colleagues in the association this wonderful interaction that they've had with you. They say this has been a completely new and mind-blowing experience for them. And it's quite wonderful. I interjected and said, well, what about the visa? And they said, well, these things happen. So they'll go back optimistic and delighted to have had this chance to meet with you and interact with you.
We do hope that the next time that we get together that you're able to come to Canada and give your talk yourselves here.
So they would be delighted to have an opportunity to come and have a time to sit with all of you and talk about crafts and demonstrate what they know and share with you. And they're looking forward to that opportunity, as well as of welcoming you to their homes.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you, Ashok, or the Jawaja artisans would like to say to their very eager group here?
They're looking forward to it, but like true entrepreneurs, they're saying what we're looking forward to is lots of orders. The President, Sukhdevji, says that his prayer to God is that occasions like this should bring the artisans of the world together, and that the artisans of the world should be able to move forward together. That is his prayer and his hope. I would, on behalf of my colleagues from the Artisans Alliance of Jawaja and all of us in this room here in Ahmedabad, like to thank Maiwa for this extraordinary opportunity. I know that it's been touched by this scandalous visa issue, but stupidity is something that we have large quantities of here in this country and all over the world. And I don't think we should make too big a deal of it, except this, to learn from this, that much more important than the denial of a visa to a group of individuals is the fact that our sector does not seem to have the kind of priority that it should. Keep in mind, as we talked about last week, that the craft sector is a sector which should be understood as the future of the world, not just of the past. It's all about sustainable livelihoods. It's all about respecting the environment It's all about equity and justice. It's all about empowering those still at the margins of our society. It's all about this whole thing that's constantly talked about these days of having a low carbon footprint. It's environmentally friendly. And there's so much going for this sector. And time and again, whether it is a loan from a bank in Jawaja or a visa from a Canadian High Commission or any other number of instances, this sector gets pushed to the bottom of the agenda. Politicians don't have much time for us. Leaders don't seem to understand it. They don't seem to get it. It's particularly disgraceful for us in India that this situation exists, because Gandhi spent his whole life demonstrating the truth of what has just been said. And present world crisis underlines what Gandhiji said all those many years ago. So we really have to get together and see how we can advocate this sector effectively so that these things don't happen, or at least they happen less often. And our sector gets the respect and the support that it deserves. Maiwa has done a fantastic job, and I think the kind of response that it's given to Jawaja goes well beyond the crisis of the visa. In many ways, we're going to learn a lot from this crisis. So there may be a blessing in disguise in some way that we now have to sit down and figure out. But thank you very much on behalf of us all. And thank you very much, Charlotte, Tim, and all of you, the manager in the shop, all of you who have come. A million thanks to all of you. And our Diwali greetings yet again. Thank you.